the Talent Experience podcast featuring authentic conversations on the future of work.
Empowering you to better understand and deliver a best-in-class, future-proofed career experience.
For more insightful conversations, visit talentexperiencepodcast.com.
We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, I'm Rhonda Taylor, and I'm your host for the Talent Experience today. And today we have such an interesting individual from across the pond. We have Mr. Bill Boorman, who is no stranger to the HR community globally. Bill specializes in the recruiting space, but he is most well known in being an advisor to startup organizations and large organizations such as Volk, Horsefly, Convey ID, and Rollpoint, who is no stranger to the HR space. He also works with the VC community in helping startups, and he's actually launched a new national health program in the UK in regards to hiring of nurses. So, Bill, did I cover everything? Is there anything else you want to say?
Pretty much. It's Rollpoint. Rollpoint we sold to JobVite, so it's now Real Links that I work with on the referrals. But yeah, that's on the money. You'll remember me from the Rollpoint days.
Oh, exactly. So, Bill, what's really interesting right now is what's happening in the talent acquisition space and how it's marrying into the learning development space and how that's rolling into the career pathing space. And I guess the one question, in the past, TA was never part of HR. Is TA now part of the HR function?
Well, personally, I'd say TA has always been part of HR, just never identified with HR. So we've had a lifelong argument, as long as I can remember, in the recruiting space of who should recruiting report to, who should TA report to, should it be marketing, should it be anyone but HR? And I think the reality is that's over. That's had a number of effects. One of them is you very rarely, probably in my 40-year career, I've seen 5 people go from talent acquisition to the senior CHRO board level seat. So I think we're now in a position where talent acquisition is firmly in the HR space. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that we're going to talk about a little bit during the show. But now more than ever, talent acquisition is an HR function, a very functional and active part of HR, and well beyond where maybe we've been sat in the past, which has been in purely supply chain. It's been purely getting enough people into enough jobs, and I think the roles become much broader, and got much more firmly embedded in HR thinking.
Yeah, and it's all evolving. Traditionally, talent acquisition, it was considered external recruiting, but now we're seeing the evolution of internal recruiting. And how is that affecting the talent acquisition world?
Well, I think it's this move from being purely supply chain, right? So we've been very focused within TA on supply chain, which is getting enough candidates in the pipeline, very heavily focused on attraction, very much a rinse and repeat, as in you get new roles come up, you attract new people into those roles, you might go through routes like job posting or whatever you do, you kind of start that process again every time a new role comes up. And I think I think TA leaders have done that very well. They've really weathered supply chain changing numbers, whereas where we're at now is we're seeing certain things which are quite clear. One is the actual teams have shrunk, so talent acquisition teams have shrunk as we went into COVID and lockdowns, and we're not getting an indication that those team sizes are going to grow, but we're seeing hiring at record levels. So and we're also seeing the battle for candidate shortages. You've got lots of other things which have become which have moved over into being a talent acquisition responsibility. So evolving from what was essentially a supply chain function of getting enough people in the top of the funnel to make sure there was enough successful people at the bottom of the funnel when they got hired. What we're now seeing is broader. Now that started with bringing onboarding into talent acquisition probably about 4 or 5 years ago, where talent acquisition leaders had to bring on onboarding, and we lengthened what we would consider the time to hire to include onboarding. Onboarding began with the logistical bit, are we getting enough contracts out, are people actually starting, to the relationship bit of, okay, what happens when someone joins the organization, what's the process. We've talked about it a lot, being like the first 100 days. How do you get someone from zero to productive who's a new hire? And more of that came into talent acquisition, which is what's historically been probably HR thinking, and or other parts of the HR team. The next important thing I think that became apparent and has evolved in a lot of organizations is a realization that actually the biggest part of employer brand, when we look at the attraction aspect of employer brand, what makes people join organizations, the biggest attraction is the learning and career development opportunity, right? So whether it's focused on jobs rather than careers, which is where I think candidates are at now, but looking at jobs and saying, right, okay, what am I going to learn in this organization? So what's attracted people to organizations is, who am I going to learn from? Who am I going to work with? What's the work going to be like? Which then means the learning content becomes super interesting to people from an attraction perspective. And so that was the next trend, was we unlocked, I'd go into organizations initially, and they'd say, well, who were looking to move towards certainly the brand advocacy attraction of saying, right, but then saying, well, actually, a lot of what we saw was really employer bland rather than employer brand. There was lots of people producing lots of stuff about a day in the life of hashtags, videos, whatever it might be, and all look pretty much the same. But one of the candidates, when we looked at the data as to what do people respond to, it was, and what kept people connected, whether they were looking for a job or not with an organization, who were in the right target group, it was the learning content. Where can I go and learn? As people's careers with organizations have shortened, they've sought more of their learning content externally and personal learning for personal development, right? So what we've seen is that the learning content became attractive for connecting the right kind of target audience with an organization. So we started unlocking more of going into learning teams and saying, what's not proprietary? What can we share with the world? What showcases us? How do we attract that, tie that into attraction and employer brand to showcase what it's like to work here? So that then brought the learning teams working closer together with talent acquisition leaders in the right kind of organizations, initially for contact and attraction. And then the next thing that happened was internal mobility is shifting into a responsibility of talent acquisition, which is kind of the right place for it, because if the TA leaders are the best people at identifying talent, they should be the best people at identifying internal talent in terms of who should be moving. Now, probably where we're at the moment in that and in the internal mobility space is it's still within talent acquisition quite transactional. It's still quite a case of looking at the internal talent, doing things like creating more visibility of opportunity, internal matching and sourcing in terms of reaching out to people. I think breaking down the real barrier to internal mobility, which is generally politics in an organization, the structure of who can talk to who and who can move who. Most people in organizations kind of go, yeah, we're totally behind internal mobility, just not my people. So I think we've seen a breakdown of that. There's been more of an acceptance that if we want to retain talent, we need to move people around. They're going to naturally want to move on from a role between 18 months and 2 years. That's a natural thing that's going to happen. And if we stand in the way of that happening in an organization, they're going to make those moves anyway. They're just going to make it in another organization. So coming at it from a retention point of view, and also a real talent and skills shortage in the market globally, wherever you look, meant we began to look much closer at where's our internal talent and what skills have we got and how can we move people about. When that went into talent acquisition, initially it was short-term internal mobility over matching and placement of internal talent rather than career development. And where we've now gone to is an understanding that actually now we're getting the hang of internal mobility. People, we've broken down the politics of moving people around organizations. We're looking even a lot closer at career pathing. How do we get people interested in where they might go to see a future and vision a future within the organization? And one of the things how can that be led by the individual rather than led by the organization? Because career paths historically have been organizational led. You've gone in for your performance review, your personal development plan, whatever you wanted to call it, and very much what was provided to you from a training and development perspective was the direction the company wanted you to go in. So it was very much a straight path of, well, you want to go into we want you to become a manager. And that's why we got a lot of people in leadership roles who really weren't suited to them. They didn't have the skill set, but they were great performers as operators. They performed very well. So I think what we've realized and learned over time is actually we need to open up career path opportunities for people to choose their own direction, which might be vertical, it might be lateral, they may go in any direction. So opening up more of those career paths and putting opportunities forward for people to start thinking 12, 18 months. Now, what that means is then start bringing in performance management, learning and development, career development, and learning. You bring L&D and talent acquisition together. And I've been working with 1 or 2 organizations where we've actually made that a single function. And I believe that's the future, both from an attraction point of view, content point of view, but also bringing in internal mobility and career pathing, and making that possible means L&D and talent acquisition becomes a single function working in the same direction in favor of the organization. So that's kind of where my thinking is, and that's what I'm driving for at the moment.
That's interesting. And when they merge these 2 roles, because what you're saying is so it's very logical. What was the name? Because that's sort of like we're witnessing a lot of new HR names surfacing in the HR community, like remote director, to anything regarding the COVID coordinator. What did your clients call this new position?
Well, we've got all kinds of things. Usually it's coming under a people title, which is essentially what it is. It's people in an organization, whether that's people outside the organization or people inside. So I think once you bring together L&D and talent acquisition, potentially you're going to lose the traditional talent acquisition titles within that. But really that's semantics. It's less about what we call it and more about the vision of where we're going. And it's a real function, it's real functions that bring together L&D and talent acquisition working as a single function with a shared objective. And the shared objective is the headcount in the organization. What does the business need in terms of people? And some of that is going to be future. That's where you might bring in your workforce planning and your development. Some of that is increasingly in organizations project-based. Who's got the skills and how do we bring in? One of the things we can take from L&D and internal mobility is 2 key things you get, I think, out of the data once you start getting focused on what you're doing here. One is if people are free to develop around whatever content and initiatives that they want to choose, you have a very clear indication of where their interests lie in terms of their future career, because you can see what they're consuming, you can see what they're involved in. You can put some assessment in there. So if you're running simulations, tests, training, all of that, MOOC type stuff, all of that is generating scores, which gives us a very clear idea of a very data impression of capability and direction as to where people want to go. So it's a lot of things happening when we become focused on that direction.
Yeah, and there's so much going on in that space right now, and the number one concern of a lot of people coming out of this COVID era is, where am I going to be in another 5 years, or where? Well, not even 5 years, because with the gig economy, that's shifting also. But people are very much in charge of their careers. And internal mobility is opening that door. Now, talent acquisition is taking care of internal mobility. Do you believe that, or do you think that's coming under another?
That's where we're going. But whether we call it talent acquisition when we bring learning and development into a single function, don't know. And I think that's semantics. The direction of travel of organisations is considering talent as a whole and what needs to happen in there. And that's why right at the top of the show, I've said it's a much more holistic HR thinking rather than supply chain thinking. Supply chain thinking is get enough people in enough seats.
Yeah.
For the start date. This is a much broader vision for the function, using more disciplines, using things like data and people to work data, marketing people, bringing together specialists to work on a single focus, which is how do we have the optimum people at the right skill level at the right time to deliver what the business needs, and that's really where I believe we're driving. I think COVID's accelerated a lot of that because it's created a lot of need for digital transformation, which has jumped ahead probably 5 years in terms of the way some of the things we're working on would have taken us 3, 4, 5 years to get sorted. So I think that COVID has accelerated that. I think remote working creates another opportunity, but then it also creates another challenge. How do you do your internal mobility for remote workers? Or does everyone become a gig worker and work a gig? I think what you're going to see, the biggest change in people, and we've been seeing this for probably about 4 years, we've been tracking this trend, is I believe people are more focused on careers than ever before. They're just not focused on careers with a company. So people are thinking much more about where are they going to get their self-development and their self-learning, and how are they going to make that portable between organizations. Organizations need to respond to that by creating that internal mobility, because if you create that internal mobility, if you naturally believe people are going to want to change roles about every 18 months, which is what we're seeing, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have a little dramatic bit at the moment while we have the Great Resignation at the end of what they're calling the Great Resignation at the moment. That will sort itself out in a period of time. This is just people really tired after COVID, I think, really tired, and needing a fresh start. But that will settle down. That will settle down in probably 3 months' time. And the talent shortage is going to be solved by a total talent management approach. And we've gone from concept to really seeing it happen. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. And Bill, one of the things that I'm excited about is that the employee now is starting to be in charge of their career.
Yeah.
And
well, they always have been. They just haven't always been allowed, right? So they've always had the choice to do what they want to do. It's just that society, employment, future opportunities, banking, loans, whatever it is, have always looked down on staying in a job 18 months, 2 years. Now, society doesn't do that anymore. It's a different world, and I think COVID's made us play catch up.
Yeah.
As talent acquisition teams, we're beginning to catch up with what the people want, whereas we were like 5 years behind it, probably.
Yeah, it's the employees' world now.
It's the employees' world. That's why all the areas like employee engagement, wellness, remote working, all this kind of stuff is the ED&I is the top topics right now, and we've got a very exciting future to play in it.
Yeah. And I actually, we talk in our office about the employee having the opportunity of having a GPS and being able to plot where they want to go to with their career. And that's the future, Bill.
It's self-service, right? It's self-service, self-choice, and it's determining exactly what I said in the beginning. It's the company doesn't decide where you want to go, you do.
Yeah.
They just provide the opportunity. Our job is to mobilize and not to manage. That's the future of the workforce.
Yeah. Well, Bill, you are always so insightful. I thank you for being our guest, but before I let you leave, I have to ask you our favorite question that we have for our guests. And that is, Bill, you've been in this space, gosh, a while. And I have seen you present in Amsterdam, Paris, New York, Vegas, and you always exude the same energy. How do you stay on top of your game, Bill?
It's exciting, right? It's people. So I always work to, you look at my LinkedIn profile, I have quite a simple vision, which is to make recruiting better for everyone. And that's for companies, for all the stakeholders, particularly the candidates. And I think that's always exciting and it's always interesting. It's always moving. So as long as we keep challenging ourselves and keep talking to people, keep listening, keep seeing what's going on, that's where the energy comes from, and it's a real privilege to be in the space and the position that I am. Yeah. I've had a great 2-year lockdown. I've spent a lot of time working with the homeless and stuff and done a lot of things because I got the privilege of time. So I think it recharges the priorities, but the energy's there, because how can you not get excited about people? How can you not be excited about that?
Yeah. And Bill, I really admire you for doing that. For the listeners, Bill actually took 2 years during COVID to work with the homeless in his community, serving meals. Gosh, I don't know what else you did, Bill, but I followed you on your Facebook page, and I thank you for giving back.
I took all the pleasure out of it because I've never had time to actually get active, and I could for a couple of years, and I'm now taking on trustee of a few charities that work with the homeless, and we're working on housing, so we're getting outcomes. But this is what years and years of recruiting trains you for.
Right.
Ready for these. So it's been great.
Yes. Well, this is Rhonda Taylor with the Talent Experience, wanting to thank Bill Boorman for being my guest today. Thank you all for listening. Bill, final word?
No, thank you. Just keep safe.
Will do.
We're nearly through this one. We'll be ready for the next challenge and enjoy it.
Take care, all. Bye now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Talent Experience podcast.
For more talent experience and future of work conversations, visit talentexperiencepodcast.com.
Follow us on Twitter at TalentXPodcast.
Or join the conversation with #Talent Experience Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
The Talent Experience podcast was brought to you by the fabulous Fuelies at Fuel 50.